I had to completely redo my intro because when I sat down to make this video, I didn't realize I was going to have this much to talk about each individual skill, but let me give you the synopsis of what you would have seen in my previous video intro. Playing the press release beta, we got a ton of information revolving around the Barbarian, the Sorceress, and the Rogue, which is absolutely fantastic. The only problem is that for max roll, I'm going to be covering the Necromancer as the class lead. Now, if you're a super sleuth like us, though, you'll realize that there was a lot of information hidden in the different menus, as well as systems in the game, most notably the Codex of Power. In the Codex of Power, we're able to see every legendary aspect that the Necromancer will be able to unlock. At least at this point, keep in mind everything that we saw in the press release beta is liable to change. None of this is set in stone. We were given an early view access of the game, so I would assume a lot of these numbers, even potentially any of the skills themselves, to change completely. If you go through and look at the June quarterly update, where they did a pretty deep dive on the Necromancer, and then put that together with the Codex of Power, you start to get a really good idea of what the Necromancer class is going to look like and what we can expect from the skills and how the gameplay should feel. So because of that, I'm going to go ahead and break down each skill that we at least know they have named and we have seen in the Codex of Power and try to construct for you an idea of what the Necromancer legitimately looks like based off of this information. So I hope you enjoy this episode of what is the Necromancer going to look like in Diablo 4, starting off with our first bone skill, Bone Spirit. The first thing to know is that right here, they actually define a lot of the characteristics of their bone skills. First, they state that they are physical in nature. I'm going to assume that this means that they're going to deal physical damage. Because they are physical, in theme, they're going to benefit more heavily from effects like critical strike. So your bone skills can crit, and they're going to benefit more from focusing on critical strike and critical strike damage on your gear. They said they benefit from spending large amounts of essence. So essence is almost certainly going to be the Necromancer's resource name. This is your mana. So in spending more essence and relying more heavily on critical strike, they're going to cause their individual attacks to be more powerful. So what this says to me is that bone skills are going to be your single target nuke skills moving forward. Right off the bat, they named the first skill, and that's Bone Spirit. So Bone Spirit returning Diablo 4. Bone Spirit, sadly in Diablo 2, outside of PvP, never really had a lot of play around it, so I'm excited to see it return in Diablo 4 and potentially be an amazingly powerful single target nuke. The reason why I'm so sure in saying something like that is because they then highlight two things about Bone Spirit. One, that it has a cooldown. So typically the cooldown skills that I played with on the Barbarian were stronger and dealt more damage to offset the fact that it had a cooldown. And on top of that, Bone Spirit is going to consume all of your essence. So anything that uses all of your mana in a single attack almost certainly has to be a massive nuke. They highlight here that Bone Spirit is actually going to seek out your target. It is going to explode on impact, dealing a large amount of damage to the individual target and then surrounding enemies. It says that the damage is going to be increased based off how much essence was consumed when you cast the spell. And I can interpret that to mean builds which are able to either stack a lot of essence or more quickly regenerate essence, so that you're always casting at 100% of your maximum essence, are going to be very beneficial when you're looking to prioritize using this Bone Spirit skill. The skill has an additional mechanic that says when it critically strikes, its cooldown is going to be reduced. Any build that is able to get a lot of essence very quickly, as well as stack a lot of crit or cooldown reduction, is going to see a massive uptick in damage output from Bone Spirit. So now that we have all of that, let's go ahead and look in the Codex of Power to determine if there are any skills that will actually benefit Bone Spirit or Bone skills to achieve this goal. So what's very interesting from the different aspects that we're able to find in the Codex of Power when it refers to Bone Spirit is that there were additional powers that, after rereading through them and the breakdown of what bone skills should look like, you realize that they're already building in this synergy between the bone skills and at the very least between the blood skills as well as your skeleton army skills. So I'm going to start here with the obvious ones and then work our way through the other Codex powers that more indirectly empower this build. So first off, we have Possessed Blood. Possessed Blood says that when you pick up a number of blood orbs, and at least the number that we saw in the Codex of Power was 5, you cast a free Bone Spirit that is going to be looking at your percentage of life left to determine the bonus damage that it will deal. So this right here is already very interesting. If Bone Spirit is supposed to be a high pay, high reward single target as well as minor AoE nuke effect, being able to get a free Bone Spirit at all already seems kind of wild, but then you remember how Bone Spirit works and it seems to make a bit more sense. If Bone Spirit is going to consume all of your essence when cast, and it's going to deal increased damage based off of how much essence you had, that means that casting one for free can't possibly use your essence. That's just not what the word free means. So because of that, it's instead going to be looking at your maximum life, but it says based off a percent. So you can only ever have, theoretically, 100% of your maximum life. So whereas it looks like there are ways to gain more maximum essence, the Bone Spirit you proc from this almost certainly is never going to be dealing near the amount of damage, but we can at least assume that it's going to be looking at your skill rank for Bone Spirit and any additional passives or enhancements you might have on the skill. Looking at our second aspect, we get an even better idea of what Bone Spirit is supposed to do. With Swelling Curse, your Bone Spirit is actually going to deal a multiplicative damage increase equal to how far it travels to its target. And since it says up to a percent, I assume that there is a maximum distance. I don't think you're going to be able to cast your Bone Spirit and then have the monster run away and somehow deal quadrillions amounts of damage. This also means that being able to long shot snipe a target with your Bone Spirit playing from the back lines probably synergizes very well with having a skeleton army to be able to stand back from. The next Codex power is called Torment. This says that critical strikes with bone skills are going to increase your essence regeneration by a percentage for 4 seconds. So if we remember that Bone Spirit is going to reduce its cooldown when you critically strike, meaning that you're going to have less time to accumulate the amount of essence that you would probably want to maximize its damage, this Codex power is going to help you actually be able to regenerate essence in the amount of time that you would need to be able to successfully cast your next Bone Spirit at that maximum potential. Now keep in mind, there's almost certainly other bone skills as well, so I'm not saying that there isn't going to be another way to generate resource. Depending on what these numbers look like, it might be an uphill battle for generating resources or managing your resources on the Necromancer. So a simple utility aspect like this, which doesn't necessarily look too powerful, may be absolutely necessary to keep your Bone Spirit machine going. Now here were the two things that I thought were very interesting, which indirectly affect your Bone Spirit skill and help to paint a bigger picture of the Necromancer overall. Potent Blood says that when you are at full life, a blood orb is going to grant you essence. Now, this is the second time that we've seen blood orbs specifically called out when it relates to this topic. There's even an additional Codex of Power that says another thing about blood orbs, which we'll talk about later. Based off of my playing of the Barbarian, the Rogue, and the Sorceress, I never found or was able to pick up a blood orb. I'm assuming is something that is specific to the Necromancer themselves. And if I had to assume, it probably heals you since it's checking if you are at full life and now granting essence. So I assume they don't normally grant essence, but you would need this to do that. So now we see that picking up blood orbs, which potentially keep you capped off at life, which is probably really important for the free Bone Spirit you're going to be shooting off when you pick up at least 5 of these things. And now picking them up is also gaining you essence. So if we assume that blood skills are going to generate blood orbs, then it makes sense that your bone skills as well as your blood skills are going to be working in concert here. Potentially blood skills are going to help keep up all of your resources, and then you're able to capitalize that on these big nuke skills like Bone Spirit. And then the last thing here, which again doesn't look altogether that powerful, is telling an incredibly important story about how resources in the Necromancer is going to work. Requiem says you gain an amount of maximum essence equal to the number of minions that you have on the battlefield. So not only do we know that you can go past your maximum essence value here, and depending on how many minions you can have, we can assume that you can at least gain 20 maximum essence from this. So now we're at 120 maximum essence. Bone Spirit deals more damage based off of how much essence was spent. So if you can increase your total from 100 to 20, you're increasing your Bone Spirit damage by 1/5. Now it probably makes more sense that both blood orbs and critically striking with your bone skills is going to increase your ability to regenerate essence, since we're going to have to keep ourselves above max cap for maximum potential. There you have it, with a little bit of information from the Codex of Power as well as checking out a Diablo 4 quarterly update. We're able to piece together a lot of the identity and what to expect for the skill Bone Spirit for the Necromancer. We learned how you're potentially going to be synergizing with your other blood skills as well as your armor Army of the Dead skills, and what the gameplay, game style, or stat prioritization might look like for the class who's looking to maximize the potential for Bone Spirit. All in all, I'd say the skill looks a lot better from its D2 days, and I'm excited for the Necromancer to have really powerful single target nukes outside of what it has had previously, which was mostly just corpse explosion and prey. Thank you so much for watching this pretty deep dive video on his single skill. I hope that you enjoyed it and look forward to the other Necromancer skills that we can definitely say Blizzard has at least talked about once or twice. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.